I have a whole bunch of things that I'm not going to show you. There's maybe like 2 or 3 of these I'm going to show you. This is sort of leftover from a longer talk on the traditional teaching of karma and rebirth in Buddhism that, in fact, I gave here at the Hartford Street Zen Center on a Saturday morning. But I would like to just briefly touch on what the traditional teaching is, hopefully get rid of some misconceptions, and then I would like to share a different perspective on karma and rebirth, one that hopefully will be a little more useful or helpful. And then I'd just like to open it up to discussion. So hopefully I can get all my stuff done in 20 minutes or so. So we'll see. So the first thing is, let me hold this up. You getting that on the camera?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
What they do in the office.
Yeah. So the first thing is that rebirth in Buddhism is not reincarnation. So that's the first misconception that I would like to tackle. Now, there are some Buddhist writers who will use the term reincarnation. Okay, fine. You know, rebirth, reincarnation are English words, and they don't exactly match the words used in Sanskrit anyway. And in fact, at this moment, I couldn't even think of what the Sanskrit word is. But rebirth is a much better word, or sometimes even re-death, because reincarnation, just look at this, incarnate, carnate, in the flesh, coming into the flesh, incarnate. We're going to come into the flesh again and again and again. So there's this idea that there is this spirit or soul that basically has a kind of self-identity that doesn't change and is independent of other things, and it kind of floats around in the spiritual ether and just enters a womb and reincarnates and becomes a person, gets old and dies, and then the body is cremated or buried or eaten by wolves, and you know, and then the soul or spirit self floats off until it looks for another womb to rest in, and that's reincarnation, and that's kind of the Hindu idea. It is the idea in certain esoteric teachings in the West. You know, who was it? Pythagoras, I think, taught this kind of idea, Plato. But that's not what we're talking about in Buddhism. Not quite. How many of you here are familiar with the 5 aggregates? Just raise your hand. Ooh, not that many. Okay. Very briefly, the Buddha was trying to get people to understand that we are not a fixed, independent, unchanging self. We go through life most of us, I know I do, you know, very self-absorbed, self-concerned. Everything's about, you know, what's in it for me, what's that mean for me, what's going to happen to me. And the Buddha realized that this was not a very fun way to go through life, and that you didn't have to go through life this way. And in fact, you can awaken to a selflessly compassionate way of living life, but first you have to kind of let go of that fixation on the self. And to do that, he taught people kind of a form of analysis. You know, really look, in meditation we just spent 20 minutes getting calm and centered. In that calm and centered state, just really look at what it is that makes up your life. What is this life you think you have? Is there anything fixed, unchanging, independent about it? Or is it kind of a grouping, an aggregation of different phenomena kind of working all together? You know, so obviously we have form, right? We have a body here. This form interacts with the forms around us, not just, you know, things to touch, but things that I hear and smell, see. And so then there's the second aggregate, feeling. I feel things constantly. That's how I know I'm alive. You know, I feel things I like, things I don't like, things that are like, I can ignore that. based on that feeling, I have perceptions. I start to categorize these things that I'm feeling. You know, oh, Stephen, I recognize him. Or, you know, oh, I recognize this table from being here last time. You know, oh, water. I know for myself whether it's hot or cold. That was a Zen joke. I see nobody got it. Anyway. So after perception, then we have mental formations. We start to get ideas and thoughts and complexes about all this stuff that we're feeling and perceiving. And then there's consciousness, the fifth one. We have this reflexive awareness that all of this is going on. And so in breaking down our selfhood, quote unquote, into these 5 aggregates, the Buddha is showing that we are really a process. We are a dynamic, interdependent process, not a fixed, solid block of self. So what the Buddha was trying to do was show that not only is it nice or a good idea to be less fixated on self and more selfless, but in fact that matches the way reality really is. Do we need to fix the lights, or should I go on?
I guess I missed on that. So.
No, continue going. Continue
Okay.
going.
All right.
Oh, the circuit breaker. Yeah. Okay. Let there be light.
Yes. So, as I was saying, not only was the Buddha showing that, you know, it would be more pleasant to go through life more selfless, but it makes sense. It makes sense because that's how things really are when you really look at them in a state of calm, centered clarity. This isn't some kind of mystical doctrine of selflessness, you know, ooh, there's some selfless spirit that's going to... No, no. It is just simply giving ourselves a chance to really stop and see. Now, what the Buddha taught, and he actually did teach this, it wasn't, you know, he wasn't catering to the Brahmanistic people around him. Some people have said Buddha talked about rebirth just because everyone believed that was the case, and so he sort of came down to their level. And no, the fact is the Buddha was not shy about contradicting the common beliefs of his time, one of which was that there is a fixed self, which was called the Atman. So he contradicted that, and if the Buddha really didn't believe in any kind of rebirth, he would have said so. But in fact, he positively affirmed rebirth, and he positively refuted the materialist of his time who rejected the idea of rebirth, and also the idea of karma, or action, that whose consequences carry over from moment to moment, from lifetime to lifetime. We'll get to that in a second. So when someone dies, the form, as we know, becomes mulch for the garden. Actually, recently, a dear friend of Stephen's and I passed away, and for his funeral, he asked that all his friends take his ashes and plant daisies with them.
Daffodils.
And daffodils, right. Oh, I thought it was daffodils. So, and I was thinking about that later, like, oh, he wants to literally push up the daisies. Very funny. So they're daffodils. And that's the kind of sense of humor that he had. So, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so the form kind of dissipates and contributes to other forms. You know, so now it becomes even more blatantly interdependent. So what happens to consciousness? What happens to the mental formations? And even the capacity of feeling and perception. In classical Buddhist psychology, the mental formations, all of our thoughts and emotions, and also feeling and perception, are considered the associates of consciousness. And as these feelings and emotions arise moment to moment, they influence consciousness. You know, just the way you might have a clear jewel, and if you put it on a blue towel, it'll take on a blue color, and then you put it on a red one, it'll take a red color. So all these mental associations, feeling, perception, mental formations are constantly influencing how consciousness is, although consciousness itself is just bare awareness. And the idea is that upon death, this consciousness is perpetuating itself into a newly formed consciousness, which carries the imprints of all these mental formations. And that, after death, will then become part of the process of a new being coming into being. It will join the sperm and the egg of a new person. So you have sperm, you have egg, and then you have this imprint, or this newly arising consciousness with the imprints from the last moment of consciousness of the person who died. And that's actually the Theravadan way of talking about it. In Mahayana, we talk about intermediate life, and in Tibetan Buddhism, they have, the bardo and all that. And I'm not even going to get into that stuff. So, what you have is not a fixed, unchanging soul passing from the death of one being and taking up space in a new womb. What you have is the perpetuation of a certain kind of consciousness, a certain conditioned consciousness, perpetuating itself into a new life that's coming into being. So in one way, it's a whole new person, or being, or whatever, new monkey, new goldfish. But in another sense, it is continuing, it is part of the continuum of a stream or flow of consciousness and the associations of consciousness. Yes?
What's moving this consciousness into, when it takes on a new form, or, again, I mean...
Right, what's the medium of communication? Yeah, very good question. Nobody has ever satisfactorily answered that. If you see those little toys they have for desks, the little ball bearings, and they're all hanging, and you pull back the one, and the energy transfers until the last one moves up. It's kind of like that. The energy is getting moved, but nobody. Well, in the Buddha's time, nobody even thought to ask, what is the medium of transfer of this energy? And of course, now we do ask questions like that. So Buddhism, as far as I know, does not provide a satisfactory answer to that question, except to say that there is some field upon which these interactions take place that is not one that is physically measurable, which is not a very satisfactory kind of thing.
Not measurable yet.
Not measurable yet, perhaps, yeah. For instance, I understand that there are some particles that, after they come into being, no matter how far away they are, they could be just how do I want to put it, millionth of a second apart, or they could be like on the other ends of the universe. If one is spinning this way, the other will spin the other way. And then if you could change the rotation, the other one would match it. And yet physicists don't understand how they can communicate that. So who knows, there may be very subtle levels of interaction in which, even conscious patterns can transfer their imprints. I don't know, I think it's a waste of time from a spiritual point of view, trying to work that out. Maybe physicists or neurologists or psychologists could follow up on that.
What people call it cosmic consciousness.
Yeah, and other stuff. I like what Penn and Teller said about the New Age. It's pronounced the same as sewage. Anyway, so I don't worry about these things. But the point is, I hope I've been able to convey that in Buddhism we're not talking about a soul, we're talking about transfer of imprints of consciousness. And that these are constantly changing, their associations are changing. The way they are is constantly in interaction with other consciousnesses and with events. So it's an interdependent process, not a fixed thing. So that's why it's best not to say reincarnation, but rebirth. And karma, people talk about it now as though we're fate, destiny, kismet. What's that last word? Juju. Why'd you do that? Oh, it's just my karma to steal the tip from the other people. It's just my karma. No, that's not what karma means. Karma means intentional action. Karma means if you're the kind of person who steals tips from the other table, if you're in a restaurant. I don't know anyone who does this, I've never done it. But I just, for some reason, I think of that. Wow, who would do a dick move like that, That's karma, to do that kind of action. Or to leave a generous tip. I always leave 20% or more. Actually, I always try to round everything out, so it's always like however many dollars, 00. I'm kind of neurotic that way. So, you know, even if that means over tipping, I'll do that. So that's my karma, to be excessively generous and neurotic about the way I put the tips down. So that intentional action is what's going to carry over and create the circumstances I'm going to meet in the next moment, in the next year, in the next lifetime, whatever. It isn't some mysterious force that some god or some supernatural agency created. It's simply my actions and their consequences, and now that contributes to the flow, that stream of my character and the quality of my interactions with the world. So karma is really kind of about a feedback system in which my interdependent relations with other beings is going to be determined, not totally, but at least in part, by the kind of things I do or don't do. And now I can flip to the next paper. Let's see. The 5 kinds of causality. People sometimes think that in Buddhism, you know, karma determines everything. They'll talk about the law of cause and effect. And they're really only talking about karma, as though your karma is going to totally create whatever world you want, or don't want, if you make bad karma. And I've noticed that Tibetan schools especially are kind of prone to do this. I'm not really sure why, but you know, they tend to talk about karma as almost the only factor to bother taking into account. But in fact, at least in Theravadan teachings in Abhidharma is Buddhist psychology, the Buddha teaches that there are 5 types of cause and effect that need to be taken into account. You will notice that karma is only one of these. So there are like 5 streams of causality going on, mutually influencing one another. There's the physical, inorganic stream of causes and conditions. That's what a physicist would study. There is the biological stream of causes and conditions, which, of course, biologists would study. Then there's the non-volitional mental stream. This is, I think, very interesting. That 2,500 years ago, the Buddhists recognized that there are a lot of processes going on in our consciousness that are not volitional. You know, we don't determine them. We sometimes may not even be aware of them. And Buddhism took this into account. When I walk down the street and then I hear a horn honking right next to me, I'm going to jump, right? I'm going to go, what's that? I don't consciously determine to react to the sound in that way. You know, it's an unconscious process to take any alarming sound nearby and react to it in a way that will protect me from danger or make me ready.
Instinctual.
Exactly, instinctual. So, and then there's the karmic flow of causes and conditions, which are our intentional actions, our intentional wholesome or unwholesome actions. And then finally there's the law of cause and effect relating to dharma, which is a very kind of a vague category. Some people think it's a catch-all category for any other processes that just got overlooked in the first 4. Other people think that the category of dharma refers to the compassionate, free, unbound actions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So, I don't know. I kind of like that latter interpretation, but maybe that Dharma one is a catch-all after all, who knows. Okay, yes?
I was going to ask just kind of a lay question there. So I'm going down the highway at night and it's dark and a deer runs across and I hit the deer.
Right.
How does that fall in? Is there karma?
It's not intentional unless you're riding down there going, I hope I see a deer because I want to see what it's like to...
So which category would that fall in?
Well, it would be physical, inorganic, because of the momentum of your car. And, you know, the deer is moving across. The deer certainly didn't intend to get hit. So it's just physics.
Beyond your control, too.
It's beyond, right. It's just, you know, the deer was on a certain trajectory, your car was on a certain trajectory. Your non-volitional mental processes weren't quick enough to stop the car. You know. Now, if you had just been drinking, right, or if you were speeding and completely ignored the signs on the road that warned you about deer, well, then there's a certain volitional component there, which is negligence, which is irresponsibility for drinking, or driving too fast. Now, there you created karma not to kill something, but you created the kind of karma of carelessness. Now, even our legal system recognizes these distinctions, between manslaughter and murder, and just being innocent. Something's an accident. This was the whole thing about the Oscar Grant trial and Meserly. Did he intend to pull a gun and murder Oscar Grant, or was it really an accident? Was it a non-volitional mental thing that he overlooked which thing he was reaching for? And a lot of hours and hours of litigation are spent trying to, discern the difference between an intentional action and a non-intentional action.
So a lot of things can happen to you in your life that have nothing to do with your actions or intentions.
Exactly. Although Buddhism would point out that the kind of character that you have is very much determined by the kind of actions you habitually make. So how will you react to hitting the deer? How will you react to the circumstances you find yourself in a positive way, in a negative way? Will you interpret it as, people out to get you, or will you interpret it as this was just random stuff going on, or will you interpret it as, oh, I should have driven more slowly and paid attention to the sign, So it isn't just, when things happen, things aren't just happening objectively. They're always happening very much colored by the subjectivity of our character. And that subjectivity of our character is very much influenced, because it's our character, it's primarily influenced, I would say, by the karma that we have, by the habitual actions that we built up, the kind of character we've created. Actually, I think now would be a good time to share with you a quote I found. This is, who here's heard of Erasmus? Erasmus, anyone? Excellent. More people have heard of Erasmus than the aggregates. That's good. All right. For those of you who don't know, Erasmus was a 17th century humanist. I think he was Swiss. Was he Dutch? Dutch. Okay. So he apparently is the one who said this, although different people I noticed get credit for it. Erasmus wrote, "We sow our thoughts and we reap our actions. We sow our actions and we reap our habits. We sow our habits and we reap our characters. We sow our characters and we reap our destiny." And that's really what the Buddha was trying to get people to understand when he talked about karma. That we are, with our actions, wholesome or unwholesome, we are building up our own character. We are building up the way we will habitually interpret and react to the events that we meet. And when you think about it on that level, does it really matter if the circumstances in our life are, to use it the wrong way, karma from a past life? Does it really matter? No, it doesn't matter if literally the events we're meeting are, some kind of causes and conditions set up because in a past life, I don't know, we screwed people over, or we were very generous. What matters is we're meeting this situation now with the character that we have now, and the actions that we're going to commit now are going to determine our character and opportunities or lack of opportunities in the next moment. So what you could say, what some of the sutras say is, if you want to know what you did in the past, look at what is happening to you right now. If you want to know what will happen to you in the future, look at what you're doing right now. So this teaching is really saying, don't obsess about the past or the future, but just really take responsibility for what is happening here or now and try to make the best of that. And the rest will take care of itself. So, yes?
I was just going to say that along the line of the analogy of the deer situation,
Right.
I had a close friend of mine who died a few years ago from Alzheimer's. And he was a train driver for the subways in New York for almost 2 decades.
Mm.
Then he retired, came to Munich for 10 years.
Mhm.
Well, he told me that, he wound up killing a couple of people,
Mm.
but there was nothing he could do with the momentum of a train coming in the station.
Right.
And,
They
I
jumped
think
on
one
it.
was a suicide attempt, another was just carelessness.
Right.
People falling off the platform when the train. What can you do? I mean,
Right.
So I think that's a very good situation that really happened.
And that's the difference between the Buddha and the Jains and other of his contemporaries, where they were teaching that karma is any action. And the Buddha was saying, no, it's intentional action
Yeah,
that really makes the difference.
very good.
Yes, back there.
I found myself is pretty contrarian this afternoon. Don't you think that all this is just sort of a Mahayana elaboration of basically mindfulness in some ways?
No, not at all. God, no. No, this is an Abhidharma elaboration. And Abhidharma is what the Mahayana was critical of. If you want to get in all the nitty-gritty of karma and the different kinds of causes there are and conditions there are, and all the factors, that's an Abhidharma project. And I'm basically presenting a very simplified form of what I've learned through studying Abhidharma. Like these 5 kinds of causality. It's all Abhidharma. I haven't even touched Mahayana yet at all. Yeah, but the thing is it, you ask, is it an elaboration of mindfulness? Well, yes. Exactly. The whole point of mindfulness is to get us to really look at what's happening in this moment, take responsibility for it, work with it, and liberate each moment as it arises. Now, that's kind of a Mahayana spin there, actually. But it's implicit, I think, in the original teachings and the 4 foundations of mindfulness discourse.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Yes?
This isn't related to reward and punishment, though. Am I right?
Yeah, well, yeah,
Like
it's more like a cosmic feedback system, for want of a better word. There's no. You will find some Buddhist texts that do this, and they're mostly apocryphal texts, and they appear in China. But you won't find any gods doling out rewards and punishments. It's more like if you act with anger, if you act with craving, if you ignore how things are set up, you're not going to get a good result. And it's not because you're being punished, it's because you're ignoring the optimum way of kind of working the system. And whereas if you are generous, if you cultivate meditation like loving kindness, compassion, if you treat people well, the system will, you're putting something positive in the system and it will come back to you. Now, so it's, in one sense it's impersonal, so that's why you can't call it reward and punishment. It's not a punishment if I put my finger in a socket and get electrocuted. That's just the way things work. But I'm going to get hurt and I probably won't do it again. But there is a thing here, though, that if you're thinking of good causes and bad causes only in terms of what will keep you out of trouble and what will create good circumstances, the Buddha is saying you're still working with a very mundane mindset. You're still tainted by craving, attachment, aversion, ignorance. Although now at least you're kind of, you have a, what do they call it? I'm trying to think of that word. Enlightened self-interest. That's right. Now you have a more enlightened self-interest. At least you're not robbing banks. but it's still self-interest, and you're still locked within this system of causes and conditions and trying to get good effects and avoid bad effects. Whereas the Buddha is saying that really you want to let go of all that. You want to be free of this system of conditioning and feedback. Instead of being worked by it, you want to be able to work it in a selfless, compassionate way, not just for your own benefit, but the benefit of all beings. Yes?
I want to appreciate the wisdom of the teaching,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm having trouble with the feeling of superstition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I am good, then good things will happen.
Mm-hmm.
That does not match reality,
Mm-hmm.
because good people sometimes have terrible
Oh.
lives, and bad people have good lives and get away with things.
The Buddha took account of that. Actually, let's see. That's why I brought this. All right. There we go. Don't assume. What you have here is my very crude attempt at drawing one of the analogies made in the sutras. The Buddha says that there were some people who, let me take that back. Okay. There were some people who did good deeds, and now this assumes that there are people who develop through yoga the ability to see where someone will go in their next life. All right. So just kind of accept that for a moment as the premise here. So the idea is someone dies and they've done good things all their life, and then in their next life they're reborn in heaven. And then another person does good all their life and they're reborn in hell. And then on the other hand, you have someone who's basically cheated, lied, stolen, killed their whole life, and then they're reborn. Politicians, yeah, lawyers. Anyway, they're reborn in heaven. And then another one, same way, gets reborn in hell. So what happens is, somebody could come to the conclusion that there really is no such thing as law of cause and effect. You don't, the person here, obviously they did good, but they got a bad result. This person did bad, they got a good result. So what's going on? And what the Buddha points out is that in this system of putting out wholesome or unwholesome causes, you're not going to immediately get a tit-for-tat reaction. And that in fact the system is much more complex than that. Because of course there's those other forms of causality besides just karma. There's other people's free will, there's physical and biological things. And also it might take time for the wholesome or unwholesome deeds to ripen. It might take time to have that good effect come back in whatever way. It might take time for the bad effect to come back. And in the meantime, other wholesome or unwholesome acts may come to fruition. So this person is reaping bad effects, which might be from what he did in this life, or it could be from another life way back. And this could be the fruition of some good deed he did before he was being so mean. And then conversely, this person may be enjoying the rewards of his good acts now, or some other good acts may be coming to fruition. And these bad acts coming to fruition may be from stuff he did before. So the thing is, we can't really assume that this simplistic system where you're just, I mean, it's like, like you put in a quarter and you get a gumball. It's not like that. So what you could then say is, well, how do we know there's any cause and effect at all? If it's so complex that we can rationalize any, result. Oh, well, that's because of bad you did a moment ago, or 20 years ago, or in a past lifetime. And that's another diagram that the Buddha says. I am using them all. Let's see.
Who is this guy?
Buddha says there are 4 things that will drive you mad. Buddhahood, Zen, karma, and the world. I love that. He basically says trying to fathom what Buddhahood is will drive you mad. So instead, just try to achieve awakening. See for yourself. We can give you some hints, but basically you have to see it for yourself. Zen. Actually, he didn't say Zen. He said jhana, which is a state of concentration. He said, trying to work out all the different kinds of concentration and how to get them and this and that, you know, it will drive you mad. Just do it. Do the practice. Find out for yourself. Karma, trying to figure out everybody's karmic backlog and, you know, why this happened and what was the reason and how far back can we go, or projecting into the future, when will this result come into fruition. He says, just forget it. Just look at what's going on here and now. And the world, I forget why he said the world would drive you mad, but...
The origin of the world.
Oh, thank you very much. You're right. Trying to figure out whether the world is finite or infinite or not or both. Just forget it. Here's the world. Deal with it. You know? So, what the Buddha was claiming is that based on his deep yogic experience, he saw that there are patterns of causes and conditions. That this world is made up of patterns and causes and conditions, and that part of that pattern was our own wholesome and unwholesome actions. Just like Erasmus said, you know, you sow a thought, you reap an action, sow an action, reap, you know, that, so that we are at least partially responsible for what happens to us and the people around us. And that partial part is actually very important because it impacts our mind directly. And our mind is what's going to interpret the rest of the world to us. It all comes through the filter of this mind. And all the ways we react to the world, positively or negatively, are going to be motivated from here. So this is the most intimate, important thing that we can deal with. And it is the one thing that we can try to work with. You know, so that we need to take responsibility for that. Now, you know, the common peasant idea that if, you know, I knock my neighbor in the head tomorrow, I'm going to get knocked, you know. Or if I give some money to this monk, I'll win the lottery tomorrow. Well, that is peasant superstition, because they're making a lot of presumptions that the Buddha did not tell people to make. The Buddha actually presented a pretty sophisticated idea. Is there a lot of unprovable metaphysical assumptions going on even with this? Yes, there are. But I think that because these teachings are primarily teaching us to focus again and again on this moment and really look at the causes and conditions of this moment and take responsibility for them, I think they become very practical, very empirical. It's about stuff we can work with, not a system we need to believe or buy into. At least that's my understanding. You know, there are some others who will present the system as sort of the take it or leave it thing. You know, you have to literally believe in rebirth, in karma from life to life, or Buddhism just won't make sense. That's what they'll tell you. You know, a lot of Tibetan lamas take this route, apparently. I was just reading Stephen Batchelor's book. But I don't think it needs to be taken that way. And I don't think the Buddha intended people to take it that way. You know, the Buddha affirmed that there was karma and rebirth, but he also said, don't take a teacher's word for anything. You know, find out, he said to the Kalamas, find out for yourself whether something is true or false.